Yesterday, the president had his Secretary of Low Energy, Jennifer Granholm, make an announcement and a veto threat from the podium at the White House. It has to do with legislation that the House is about to pass that has to do with our emergency energy supply, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And it says if we withdraw more, we need a plan for exploration of energy in the United States to refill that. I've introduced similar legislation in the Senate. The reason this is so important is because our emergency supplies are now at a 40-year low. And we've gotten to that point because President Biden, in the run-up to the elections, withdrew from our strategic reserve 1 million barrels of oil each and every day for 6 months, 180 days, 180 million barrels of oil. And he started doing it when energy prices, gasoline was at $5 a gallon. People were feeling the pain at the pump. It's nice to see that the president finally admits that there is a relationship between supply and demand and the cost of energy and gasoline at the pump. But yet the president continues to respond to the climate crazies who call the tune at the White House, which is why they killed the Keystone XL pipeline and why he continues to hammer on oil and gas exploration in America. Well, the price of gasoline is going up again. The American people know what they want. They want energy that is affordable, available, and reliable. They want it from here at home. They don't want us going to Iran or begging Saudi Arabia or Venezuela for oil and energy. But yet this war on energy by President Biden has hurt our energy grid and has hurt our energy security. And you don't have to think back very far to see it. Look at what happened at Christmas time with the cold snap that hit the country. People across the country were told to lower their thermostat, turn off their Christmas lights, and don't plug in your electric vehicle because it was going to lead to brownouts or blackouts. And I'm not sure if the president or his sidekick, Secretary of Energy, even knows the fact that Vladimir Putin continues to subsidize the climate-crazy group of lobbyists and others who represent organizations that continue to lobby in this country against American energy. Putin has spent lots of money over a decade on this. These are the people that argue against pipelines, against energy infrastructure, against oil and gas exploration. In the meantime, my home state of Wyoming, energy breadbasket of America, is told we have to keep our affordable, available, and reliable energy in the ground. What's the president say he wants to do? Well, you heard the administration talking about banning gas stoves, and the president made a promise to the United Nations to send $11 billion each and every year to the UN for climate reparations. I am going to do absolutely everything I can as the ranking member of the Energy Committee in the Senate to make sure that the United States never, ever delivers on Joe Biden's promises.
For 3 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I do want to rise in support of the rule and support of the underlying bill. You know, it's interesting. Our Energy Secretary, Secretary Granholm, came to Austin, Texas 3 or 4 weeks ago and talked about how we should learn from the Chinese and the communist Chinese and their approach to climate change. Talk about putting polluters over people. If she would consult her own Energy Information Agency, she would see that China gets 55% of its energy from coal, whereas the United States gets 11% of its energy. And guess what? China is building more and more coal-fired plants each and every week that goes by. So who indeed is putting polluters over people? I submit it is this administration, and in the last Congress it was congressional Democrats. This bill before us today is a culmination of years of hard work by, yes, the Energy and Commerce Committee, Committee on Natural Resources, the Committee on Infrastructure and Transportation. It is a critical step forward. One of the things that I've worked on for a number of years is the Promoting Interagency Coordination for National Review of Gas Pipelines Act. It is included in this bill. I think it's critically important, not just for a state like Texas, but literally the entire country. So I'm grateful that other Republican members saw fit to include this legislation as we seek to address the obstacles preventing Americans from actually achieving lower energy costs. Look, in 2.5 years, less than 2.5 years, we've gone from relative energy abundance to energy scarcity. We've gone from energy affordability to energy unaffordability. Why in the world would we want to continue down that pathway? H.R. 1 also contains the repeal of Section 5131 of the Inflation Reduction Act. And look, this provided $1 billion to coerce state and local governments into adopting costly energy codes. If these grants were allowed to stand, they would take away local control over energy code adoption and federalize these overreaching mandates. Efforts to push costly and restrictive energy codes across the country overburden new construction and largely ignore the energy performance of the existing housing stock. New homes built to modern codes are already energy efficient, and further increases in that stringency must be carefully considered because, in fact, we're not doing that with these grant programs. You know, Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, the Congress started with what was called the American Rescue Plan. It brought us high inflation. It brought us high prices. This is truly the American Rescue Plan. Let's put energy affordability back within the reach of the average American, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves.
So I would say if the other side of the aisle had spent less time focused on January 6th and more time on solving this problem, we wouldn't be in the majority. This bill wouldn't even be coming to the floor. Elections have consequences. So just as an example of this, I wish I could play a video in here, but I understand we have different rules in the Rules Committee. We can't have props. I've thought about playing it on the microphone because I was pretty sure I could get away with it, but for at least once. But instead, I'll have to subject you to me reading the transcript of this. Secretary of Energy Granholm was asked, and I think we all remember this. I'm sure all the Democrats winced and the Republicans laughed or grimaced when they heard her answer. She was, in relation to rising gas prices, when they were $2.89 and going up, she was asked on TV, what is the Granholm plan to increase oil production in America? Her answer was to laugh hysterically for several seconds. And then say, that is hilarious. If I had a magic wand, you know, oil is a global market. It's controlled by a cartel. That cartel is called OPEC. And they did make a decision yesterday that they were not going to increase beyond what they were already planning. So, you know, the interesting thing is the Department of Energy has an energy information agency. That agency does the forecasting of what oil and gas prices are going to be as of right now. Their forecast for the beginning of December is that on average gas prices will be about $3.05 at the beginning of December. So she was actually able to forecast it. This is one of those few times when you can go back and find out that somebody in government could see what was going to happen. But she committed the same crime twice. The crime is candor. In Washington, D.C., you can be convicted for candor. Candor is saying the truth. Like, nobody in Washington, D.C. is supposed to say the truth. But she said something that's true. She said they don't have a plan. She didn't have a plan. She also said that the price was going to go up. And that's a problem when you admit to those two things, that you don't have a plan and that the price is going to go up. Oh, and that we're dependent on foreign production. She committed candor, 3 counts of candor in this one statement. And you could feel the Democrat momentum for keeping the House just sort of deflating right when she said that. So I support this bill.
Okay, folks, you can't make this stuff up. Okay, just recently, Secretary of Energy Granholm went out on a 4-day road trip in her electric vehicle to draw attention to the billions of dollars that the Greenies in the White House are pouring into their electric vehicle fantasy. So let's talk a little bit about this road trip. The predictable problem that they had on the road trip, there were not enough EV chargers. Okay, so again, you can't make this stuff up. So what did Granholm's staff do? They got in their gas-powered car and they sped ahead to get in line to save spots with their gas-powered vehicle at those electric chargers. And it was so bad in one location because the gas-powered car was blocking all of the other electric vehicles that had to charge. It was a really hot day. A family actually called the police on them. They had a baby in their car that was crying, again, really hot day. And here's a gas-powered car, Granholm staff, trying to save them a spot so they could just slip in line and get their EV charged. Okay, so folks, if the Biden administration can't make it from Charlotte to Memphis without an incident, then how do we expect that all of our non-tactical military fleet is going to get transitioned by the year 2030 without having big issues? Okay, so let's think about that. This greenie push out there for those electric vehicles, it is not realistic. We are living in an absurd world in the Joe Biden administration. So let's call it what it is, folks. It is a road to nowhere.
I'm kind of amazed by this. Ms. Donaldson, can I just ask you about another ethics issue at the Department of Energy? I'm so glad you're here, by the way. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing this job. The Wall Street Journal published back in February a report. I'm just going to quote the headline. Here it is. Hundreds of Energy Department officials hold stocks related to agencies' work despite warnings. Have you been tracking this? Have you seen these reports?
I have, Senator.
So that includes, sadly, the Secretary of Energy, who testified right there to this committee in response to questions from me that she didn't own any individual stocks. I asked her 3 times in April, do you own individual stocks? 3 times. She said, no, absolutely not, absolutely not, absolutely not. 2 months later, she wrote the chairman and said, actually, I did. And she didn't divest of them until May, and then she didn't tell us till a month later. That's a big problem. And the fact that she misled this committee and didn't tell us, the fact that we have all of these Energy Department officials holding stocks related to the agency's work, I mean, what is going on at DOE? Do you have authority to look into this, Ms. Donaldson?
Well, there's a mechanism set up in the law, which you have.
Please use your microphone, Ms. Donaldson, please. Just speak into it if you would.
Oh,
we can all hear you better.
Yeah, pull a little closer.
So you can, in fact, hold stock and be an employee for the government. You cannot participate in any decisions that might impact the value of that stock. So there's different rules that apply here, and those can be driven by Congress, or they can be driven by regulation or policy. In that particular situation, when you spoke about your questions about other DOE employees,
Right.
They get notices reminding them, basically. So if they own stock in Ford, they'll get a notice saying, don't forget, nothing having to do with Ford. Yeah. So those notices don't carry with them any kind of penalty. It's part of the process set up to make sure they keep track of their own, what you would view to be a conflict or a potential conflict.
Well, my time has expired. I just thank you for your work, Ms. Donaldson. I'm going to send you a letter about this and hope that we might ask you to look into and I know the ranking members already asked you to look into Secretary Granholm's testimony before this committee, but I am firmly of the view that we need to change the law here. Mm-hmm. Senior executive branch officials should not be able to own individual stock, nor should members of Congress. We shouldn't be stock trading, and nor should anybody who is sitting at this table. And so I just am distressed by it. It just piles up, and I'll just say this isn't a partisan issue. It happened in the last administration. It's members of both parties of Congress. We shouldn't be doing it. I've got bipartisan legislation that would end this, and I think we need to end this practice once and for all.
Mr. Norman, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My amendment cuts the salary of the Secretary of the Department of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, to $1. The job that she has done is far below standard. by any measure. She testified and promoted a company in Greenville, my state, not in my district, but my state, that she was a former board member on, and requested funds from the American taxpayer. And I've learned now with bureaucrats who make wrong decisions, the only way you deal with them is cut their salary. And I would recommend that her salary be cut to $1. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does gentlewoman from Ohio rise?
Yes, Madam Chair, I rise in opposition.
You're recognized.
Thank you. This amendment raises serious constitutional issues and may amount to an unconstitutional bill of attainder. This is not the way to handle policy disputes with the Secretary of Energy for our country. This amendment prioritizes legislative theater over the American people and doesn't have a chance of becoming law. I strongly urge my colleagues to vote against this harmful amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield the balance of my time for my good friend from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. This is not political theater, far from it. This is accountability to the American people. I rise today in support of this amendment to reduce the salary of Secretary Granholm to $1 because I cannot make her pay us back. The job of the Secretary of Energy is to secure American energy independence, but she is not securing American energy independence. She is depleting it. And she should be held accountable to the people for failing to deliver on her job. You see, Madam Speaker, before Ms. Granholm was Energy Secretary, she promoted the same failed policies while serving as governor of Michigan and presided over what is now known as Michigan's lost decade, a legacy that we are still paying for at home. She presided over the mass exodus of our jobs and our children from our state. She presided over the crippling of our economy, foreclosures of so many of our homes, and closing of our businesses. She embarrassed us with Rasco fiasco when she offered $9 million in tax credits to promote a job program that actually went to a convicted embezzler who lived out of a trailer. And you know what she did when she was done gutting and embarrassing our state, Madam Speaker? She left. She got on a plane and headed for California, where she took a faculty position in Berkeley while leaving struggling Michiganders at home, struggling in the snow. Now, Madam Speaker, while this amendment today is not about her time in Michigan, past behavior is the best indicator of future performance. So we should be appalled but not surprised by the same malpractice, malfeasance, and mistreatment of the office that she assumes currently, and has inflicted serious pain on the American people and jeopardizes our American independence moving forward. Since this administration took office, Madam Speaker, we've gone from this energy independence to energy reliance on dictators and despots around the world. Secretary Granholm sold off our strategic petroleum reserves and sold out Americans and our national security. And all the worse, she went on television and laughed in our faces just before gas prices hit their peak. The American people's pain is their plan, Madam Speaker, making gas unaffordable and trading away our national resources to China, our #1 adversary, all so they can implement their pipe dream of a forced EV transition. Now, I won't call it treason, but many in my district have. The policy she is seeking to impose billions of dollars in penalties for our autos through our EV mandates would crater the #1 industry in Michigan. We do not fear the future, but we demand to be a part of it. Madam Speaker, the consequences of her failures is the reason folks in my district are standing on a picket line right now. The unrealistic, untimely, and unjust forced EV mandates she supports is building the Chinese middle class on the backs of the middle class families in Michigan and around America. It's time for her to pay, and Congress is holding her accountable. This is the essence of what the Article 1 branch of government should be doing, is holding an out-of-control administration accountable to the people. She failed in Michigan, and we will not let her fail America. This is a warning to the American people that policies that hurt them will stop with the 118th Congress. These policies have not worked anywhere they've been tried. They have failed, and in the real world, failure means your employer takes your pay. This town needs to start operating a little bit more like the real world. That's why I support this resolution, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support it as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back, and the gentleman from South Carolina yields back. Gentlewoman from Ohio?
Yes,
For what
Madam
purpose do
Chair.
you rise?
Yes, I just wanted to say in reaction to what I just heard on the floor here, there must be two Jennifer Granholms because the one I know is simply exceptional. Mr. Chair, I yield to the gentleman from Tennessee and Chair of the Energy and Water Subcommittee, Mr. Fleischman.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Madam Chair, thank you, and I thank my ranking member for yielding to me, and I did hear both of my colleagues, but respectfully, I disagree with this amendment. I do not think that attempting to reduce salaries to $1 is likely to address this problem, and it may very well cause more problems than it attempts to create. So I will respectfully oppose the amendment and urge my colleagues to oppose the same and yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Ohio is recognized.
I yield back my time
The
remaining.
gentlewoman from Ohio yields. The question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from South Carolina. Those in favor say aye.